women think men are supposed to be like them, and men think that women are supposed to be like them in the way that we communicate without thinking about it. So there's a lot of misunderstandings and hurt and lack of appreciation. It's a general topic between couples that create distance. But what I see is changing as a trend in society is that men are actually getting more in touch with their vulnerability. And women do not yet, I feel in general, they're not able to see it and hold it and actually be gentle and caring when a man steps into his sensitivity and his vulnerability. And women are beginning to step up to their, you could call it empowerment in lack of a better word, which means that men don't identify what's happening with this woman. Why is she angry all the time? Why are we bickering? Why are we fighting all the time? So we don't understand the changes that are going on. And I think what I see between couples in general is a lot of confusion about what is it to be a man, what is it to be a woman, what is it to be in relationship, and a lot of disconnect.
I do agree that the biology hasn't changed, and probably wouldn't change within the next few centuries. These things change very, very, very slowly, but the certain trends have changed. Perhaps I feel the perception that women have of men and men have of women, that is quite symptomatic of the eras we live in. And I would say that my mother's perception of men, or that generation, or her mother's perception of men, was somewhat different than perhaps, and same thing for the perception of men about women. Like you're saying, you're talking about empowerment, so and the confusion. So in this case, men's confusion around understanding women's empowerment, and women's confusion around understanding that men are taking their first steps into becoming better communicators, better listeners, because getting in touch with your vulnerability strikes me as a first step in that direction. The perception of the other sex has changed, and that keeps changing, particularly if society changes fast. And it has over the last 50 to 100 years, hasn't it?
I think you're right, and the perception has changed, but we are also carrying over a huge, sad heritage of judgment and friction. We're still not in harmony between the sexes. We are beginning to see the differences, but we are not appreciating each other. I feel that that's a big missing. Like, women are beginning to appreciate themselves more, but it's not translating to also appreciating men. And it feels like the same. Men are getting more and more scared and intimidated by women, and actually not able to appreciate what they're bringing. So it's like we kind of crossed over. Like, before, men were in the patriarchal paradigm. That's, fortunately, it's changing now, but it's almost like we're tipping over. And now the women are taking over and overpowering men and their sensitivity, instead of both stepping down and appreciating each other. And I see that. I want to hear your experience of that, but I see that in couples work, that actually, someone can own there's something going on and the other can't hear and appreciate what it is.
Yes, I've been working with hundreds of couples, over 300, and particularly since the lockdown, since the pandemic, most of my clients have become couples. And what I end up doing as a therapist is to train men in their listening skills. And this to me strikes me as the most pragmatical, useful things I can do. But if I reflect on it, seems to be a request coming from her, and he's listening, taking on board, sees that there is apparently a crisis, doesn't necessarily agree or understand, but in many cases wants to do it. It's not easy for him to do it. So I see as women leading the process and sort of taking their man by his hand, sometimes more gently and sometimes less gently. And I feel that the couples that are able to successfully heal their problems are couples where the resentment hasn't, you were hinting on that earlier, hasn't reached a level where even if he steps up 5 levels in his empathy and listening, it's too late. By the time they come and see me, it's already too late, which is making me increasingly keen on really focusing on preparation for marriage courses or preparation for long-term relationship courses, because I feel like these things were not discussed in large part for earlier rather than later. So in the very early stages of the relationships. And they were also not discussed as and when things arrive.
But there's an important bit here that I would like to add, Francesca, because this is what I see as a female therapist, that I can definitely see the women, there's a huge cry to be heard, for the men to become present, listen to her, feel her, empathize, be there. But the very interesting thing that I've observed a lot of times is that when he tries to actually speak about his experience, maybe not in the very verbalized and emotionally in tuned way that he has, he doesn't have the same tools, but he's trying. And I see so often that she's absolutely not present herself to hear. So it's not just men have to step up. I feel it's a one-way request as I see it now. Women want men to be more present, but they are not prepared themselves to actually receive what he has to say, because he just communicates in a different way. So women think, if he doesn't communicate like me, if he's not like me, if he's not able to do the same, it's wrong. So I feel we end up on the women's premises, and that's not healthy. It's not going to create what we're looking for. And I think that's important to remember, to look at. Okay, he needs to grow, but she needs to grow too. It's 50%. It's not just, oh, women, we've done our work. Now men, you do your work. We haven't done our work either. And we don't understand men, and we are not able to hold their vulnerability. We reject it. We pretend we don't hear it.
How about we park this, because I think we're gonna keep referring to this. It seems to be very central in the discussion. So long-term relationships and marriages often imply children, having children. Unquestionable studies, huge number of them showing that single parents households are not good in general for children, how they perform at school, and how they develop emotionally, and what kind of adults they become, the relationships they form with the opposite sex, if they are heterosexual, seem to be less healthy. So there is a freedom that women fought for millennia, I'm not sure, centuries. The freedom to dissolve a marriage or a relationship that it's not healthy or that it's even abusive, versus the lack of freedom that a child has to have the best of futures. So I'm not sure. Well, I suppose it really depends on how unhealthy and abusive and whether the relationship is fixable or not.
Because of course, as parents, what we have to look at first and foremost is, what are we role modeling to our children? Is it to put up with an unacceptable situation, and also put up with a situation that's unacceptable as a partner, but might also be unacceptable to the children?